I'm gonna go in and get some thread real quick. I mean, it shouldn't take me too long. I mean, it's just thread, right? Oh my. Just thread, right? You should see. It just goes on forever. Oh my.
Hi quilty friends, welcome back. We really can get tangled up when it comes time to buy thread for our quilting projects. So today I'm going to give you 8 tips or things to kind of help guide you when it comes time to buying thread for your quilting project. The first item is to make sure that you're investing in a quality thread. Quality really matters, and especially in just the overall performance of the thread and then how it finishes in your quilting project. When you're looking at a cotton thread, a high quality cotton thread will have less lint and it also will finish nicer in your quilting project. Now, how do you tell if that cotton thread is high quality or not? You're going to want to look for something that says that it's long staple. And when you hold it up to the light, it shouldn't look super fuzzy. And that's generally a good check on quality. If that thread, when you hold it up to the light, really looks fuzzy, and this is if you have the opportunity to do so, and that looks really fuzzy, then you're going to probably want to set that thread aside. And if you're someone that uses thread to baste your quilt layers together, that would be an opportunity to use that type of thread, because that's just going to be something you're cutting out of your projects and you're throwing it away. The second item that you need to understand when it comes to buying thread is there are different types of threads out there. There is cotton thread, there is polyester thread, there is rayon, there is also something called a monofilament, there is silk, there is wool, and then there is also a metallic thread. Now, the 2 most common thread types that quilters will use are cotton and the polyester threads. Now, number 3 is to pay attention to the weight of the thread. Now, the weight of the thread is simply the measurement of the thickness or the diameter of the thread. So what you need to know is the smaller the number, the thicker the thread. The higher the number, the thinner the thread. Now, typically quilters will use a 50 weight thread when we are piecing. If you are going to then use thread for quilting your quilt, then you can use any type of weight that you want. You just need to make a decision on how you want that thread to react or work with your project. Let me show you. So I'm doing a big stitch quilt, and because I want the thread to kind of stand out, I am using a thicker thread, or what is called in this case is a 12 weight thread. I have a whole video on this project and the threads that I'm using. Put a link to it up here and you can check it out. Now, if you don't want the thread to stand out, then you're going to want to look towards like an 80 or maybe 100 weight thread, or basically just a thinner thread, because then that will meld into your project. The 4th tip is that the thread that you use on the top of your sewing machine, that weight does not need to match the weight of the thread that you put in your bobbin. A lot of quilters will use a 40 or a 50 weight up top and then use a 60 or an 80 weight thread down in their bobbin. The reason for this is that 60 or 80 weight thread is going to be thinner. You're going to get a lot more thread onto the bobbin, so therefore the bobbin lasts a lot longer. The other thing is, because that thread is now thinner, you're going to have less bulk in your seams, and it's going to help your seams lay a little bit flatter. Now, some of the bobbin threads that I just recently started using, I started using this one from Metler called, I think it's called Saraline. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's a 60 weight polyester thread. I started using this for my embroidery work that I'm doing on my machine. And then I also have the bottom line from Superior Thread, which is also a 60 weight polyester thread. There are a bunch of others out there that you can certainly check out and try. These were just two options that I've been using. I thought I'd share them with you if you're interested in exploring that and trying that out on your next project. So number 5 is to make sure that you have the right needle on your sewing machine for that particular thread that you are using. Now, a lot of quilters pretty much get into a rut and we pretty much stick with a particular thread and wait. Once you get there, we pretty much know where we're going. But if you start to experiment with other different types of weights and threads, you are going to want to make sure that the needle that you've got is going to work for that particular thread. I like to keep either a 70, an 80, or a 90 in a top stitch, a universal, or a microtext on hand. My recommendation for you is, if it is a new thread to you, is to check the manufacturer's website for that particular thread to find out what type of needle size they recommend for that particular thread. Number 6 is pretty simple. Make sure that you are running a test block and testing that tension out on your new thread setup that you've got going. And then consult your sewing machine manual for any adjustments you may need to make based on what you're seeing in the performance of that thread setup that you've got on your sewing machine. So number 7 is to keep a thread book. Yes, keep a thread book. I would recommend doing 2 pieces. I've started mine where I just have a piece of fabric and I just stitch out whatever the thread is. I write what the thread brand is, the weight of that thread, the needle that I'm using, and then any other settings I have on my machine. I just use a micron pen. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then I also am going to start using a quilt sandwich that's going to be a test case as well, where I'm going to test out different threads there and then make notes of needles, thickness, the brand of thread, and the weight, and all those things. So I have kind of like a little library of the threads that I'm using and how they perform and how they look, so I can use that for future reference when I need to kind of make decisions about my thread. Number 8 is choosing the right color of thread for your quilt. So the best way is, oftentimes the way the color looks on the spool is going to look different when you actually get it on the top of your quilt. So the best way to test to see how it's going to look is take several inches. The recommendation is 36 inches. And you just want to pull it on top of your quilt so that you can see how that's going to look. Now, if you have a high contrast quilt, then you generally want to pick a thread color that is somewhere in between those 2 colors in your quilt. Like if you have red and white, you're going to want to find maybe something in between. Now that you're struggling less with your thread, you can check out my 10 tips on how to pick fabric out for your quilt project next. But for now, I wish you all well, and most of all, be quilting.